Hi, my name is Itzel Mariposa Obsidiana, and I want to continue talking about my spiritual journey and specifically about the animal guides, the two main animal guides that guided my spiritual journey and my awareness of trauma as the wound embedded in my soul and how to heal it. So, after my father died, which is what I was discussing in my other video, if you haven't watched it, please watch it. So after my father died, I did enter an awareness of being in the underworld or the Mictlan, the third in between space of transformation. And the underworld is just where we deal with a lot of woundedness and a lot of trauma. At least that's what it means to me. So I worked really hard to heal the wound with my father, the his death, the pain that it created within me, and the violence that it left in me. So then after that, I went to college. And this is where I began to transition into a different part of the underworld, a less naive part of the underworld because it came with understanding my sexuality. Before I left to college, I was, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't even know, um, I was raped by my stepfather. And that was really difficult to unpack. I'm not going to speak about the specifics in this video, but I did want to say that this was part of my process, and later that emerged or that manifested in me becoming aware that I was being guided by the vulture and that there was a vulture in my throat here. Um, and that she was there to help me transform all the silence into creativity, all the silence and the anxiety and the mental unrest into action and into healing and revolution and radical energy. So I will explain how I became aware of the vulture. I am a writer before everything else. I've been writing since after my father passed away, was murdered, I should say. Um, I've always been writing, and writing is what allowed me to obtain an education at UT Austin, because I don't come from a family that is educated or has resources in that sense. I was new to academia. No one in my family before me had ever stepped on an academic university. And before I went to university, my mom wanted me to stay home, which of course I didn't do, or else I wouldn't have survived it. I feel that home was a space of trauma and fear and restraintment. It was very Capricornian in that sense, very wounded and very restrictive and limiting. And I didn't, and it was because of my writing and my ability to communicate my emotions and my trauma that I got a full ride scholarship at UT, which was wonderful and which I am really thankful for, but it complicated me a lot. so so at UT, I obviously was dealing with not only like class trauma because I came from like a really ignorant small community, but I was also dealing with the trauma that my stepfather left me with. I was very confused sexually. I didn't know what my sexuality was. I had never even heard of fucking tampons until I started dating my ex, which is a different story. Anyway, it was complicated. Life is complicated. Life is full of intricate details. I was really confused and I was in a bad headspace. And then I was taking some writing courses at UT, even though I was not a creative writing major. I was majoring in journalism because I was interested in being a journalist in the border of Texas and Tamaulipas, because at that point the drug war was still going on pretty steady. It was very heartbreaking, and I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to speak about these issues, and I wanted to write about the space of my community and the warfare within my community. So I thought journalism was a safe option, and I thought I would be a good journalist. And then obviously, I started feeling that I was not fulfilled by that type of writing, that I needed to express my true opinions and my true emotions. So I would take creative writing courses. And I was taking one about fiction writing. And at that point, I started being haunted by the vulture. I started thinking a lot about vultures, and I started dreaming about them. I had this idea, this story in my mind about a woman who gives birth to a vulture, and the vulture is located in her throat. And so it grows like a little ball or a little knot. It's a little knot in her throat, in her chest area. And then over the months, like, this grows like bulky and pregnant. And then the vulture um, she bites her weight out of the woman's skin, and so she erupts through the woman's throat and the chest. And then once the vulture is born, she has destroyed this area of the woman, who is me, obviously. And then the vulture eats the woman, and in her eating the bone, the dead body of the woman, which is, vultures eat shit and they eat dead things. The vulture gains the woman's consciousness, so she becomes a woman, but through this process of eating the dead remains of the woman. And so the in my story, the point of view shifted at the end, where the story shifted to being like narrated through the eyes of the vulture. So that was the general idea. And As I started to write it, I was really haunted by it, and I really wanted to make it like perfect, but I didn't know the source of the death. Like, I didn't know why the vulture was there. There were many stories in my family about women shape shifting and spirits being attached to my great ancestors. Like, for example, one of my great great grandmother, her name is Juana. She said she would tell my mother that she had the spirit of her dead son attached to her. So she read tarot, and she was a healer in my community, and she saw the future. Basically, she was blind, but she could see the future with the help of her dead son's spirit. um, and then she would also say that just different types of women were in my family were guided through different animals. So so I started thinking that maybe the vulture was a guide as opposed to something that was giving me death, or and seeing that as negative. I saw it as positive. I saw the vulture as something that was divine, that was feminine, and that was here to help and guide my spirit into a different consciousness in which I truly alchemize, married the shadow aspect in my soul to be able to make something out of death. Um, and then after I wrote the story, I workshopped it, I worked through it, but I'm still not like finished with it. It was a really complicated process. And then I started seeing like the vulture through other dreams and other synchronicities. Um, it's important to say that in 2016, I studied abroad in Mexico City, and there I met a group of healers and a group of friends who would become a really important part of my spiritual community. And one of them specifically, his name is Luis, and he comes from a line of indigenous healers in Oaxaca, Mexico. And so he, for my birthday this past May, because I'm a Taurus sun, he sent me a book about Tolteca cosmology. So the Tolteca are an indigenous group of people that predate the Mexica and the Nahua. Um, and so this book was a thesis, a master's thesis that dealt with Tolteca symbolism and how they saw like cosmic astrological energies manifested through the animal world and the world of nature. And there's a line specifically in this book that says the obsidian butterfly, and it's describing el sopilote, or the vulture, right? So it speaks about the vulture being the shadow of the butterfly, because obsidian, which is night, right, darkness, the obsidian stone is a weapon, and it is kind of related to death and ritualistic death. It's related to blood and sacrifice. So the obsidian butterfly was kind of this image of the vulture's shadow, um, or at least that's how I understood it. And that was really interesting to me, because after I went through this process of kind of clearing my throat chakra by writing, and dealing with the vulture energy, I had a dream when I was in my other abusive, toxic relationship, that again, the same thing repeated, sexual violence. uh, with my ex partner. I had this dream where it was like astral projection. I woke up thinking that I was awake. I was wearing my same clothes. Uh, I was drunk, and I was in the room. I mean, there was no alterations within the dream that made me feel that it was a dream, except that in my wall there were two butterflies, and one was yellow and the other one was blue, and they were huge butterflies. And in my dream I started screaming because I thought that I had given birth to them. So I was really shocked, and I couldn't fathom that idea. Like, I felt like, oh my god, it's finally happened. Like, my reality is it's just, it's my imagination. I Because I mean, like, I wrote a short story about giving birth to a fucking vulture, and then the vulture ate me. That was my mental space at that moment. And then to have a dream where I actually gave birth to the butterflies, like, that was to me shocking, and it terrorized me at the moment in which I was dreaming it. And then in my dream, through the door comes out my ex. um and so my ed says, like, no, Itzel, these butterflies are paper. They're like construction paper, papel mache, I think. I don't know how to translate that into English, but he's like, no, these are fake, they're not real, you're panicking, this is an anxiety attack. I'm like, no, I know who I am, I know my reality, you cannot lie to me anymore. And I push him away, and the door is open, so the butterflies fly out the door, and I run after them. And I remember this so vividly. I was wearing like a long red skirt and a blouse that exposed like my breast. And when I was running after the butterflies, my skirt was falling apart, and my breasts were coming out of my blouse, and I was running like I had never run in my life. And that was a moment where I experienced liberation. And I feel that this book gave me the key to understanding my creative process and how it was advancing. Because, okay, so if they believed that the butterfly and the vulture were related, because maybe like the butterfly is the light symbolism of what a vulture does, the vulture is obviously the dark shadow of the butterfly, right? They're both animals are spiritually connected to one another, but in different colors. And they're connected to each other because they work with death. They work with the process of transformation, transforming the physical bodies into other realities, into other aesthetics. The butterfly goes to a lot of space of in betweenness, of dreaming, of sleeping, and then it becomes this beautiful light vessel that is alive briefly and then it dies again, all to go through that um, transformation into beauty and light and um, just flightiness, right? Whereas the vulture is more of an elder type of suspicious figure, and it's a scavenger, but it's clean. It knows how to take so little and things that are so rotten and disgusting, right? So dead, so uh past their past their moment, right? Whereas the butterfly exists in the moment. But these rotten things, they're they're not even in the past. They are no longer in synchronicity or in harmony with life. So the vulture takes that, puts it in her body, and then she acquires life source through that. She does a labor that is so important in our environment, which I don't feel like we've even integrated the lessons that the butterfly and the vulture have to offer to us. I don't feel that we are clean, and I don't feel that a lot of people are in harmony with the rhythm of nature, the movement of death. And both of these animals are. And I think that I started with the vulture because I needed to integrate my shadow self really firmly before I started creating light, which is, the butterflies, before I started manifesting beauty and tranquility within me. I think that uh, the process is not finished, obviously. I think that I am a mother, and I do feel like my consciousness has given birth to these symbols so strong and so powerfully feminine, such as the vulture and the butterfly. And I think I needed to do this to kind of terminate relationships of toxicity within my life that were literally killing me. Um, Obviously, one of them with my stepfather, and what happened when he raped me. And when I told my mom, she didn't believe me. Of course, I didn't tell her immediately. I first had to go through that silence. And then when I vocalized it, I was able to kind of start creating the butterfly consciousness, right? But I was still captured in a really toxic relationship with my ex, in which I felt like my body was worthless. I was not creative. I was his servant. I was continuously raped and taken advantage of. I was there to process his emotions and nothing else. And I had no identity of my own. I didn't have any autonomy. So I think that's kind of what I want to say. I feel that it's really complicated, and to formulate like a summary or like a thing that attaches all of these together is kind of impossible. I just know that one, I'm a writer. Two, I was spiritually guided by these symbols, my animal guides, vulture and butterfly. And three, I'm still trying to find out the 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 integration of these images and the integration of myself into my higher self, right? And why I feel that I have access to these symbols, why these energies came into my life and what they mean. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I did want to talk about them right now because I feel like they were a big part of my spiritual journey. And yeah, it's a weird timeline, and I hope that makes sense. If it didn't, well, that's fine too. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've had like experiences with animal guides. I kind of just want to make a YouTube channel where I just sit and talk about what is going on and like what my journey has been about. And eventually I'll get to like making more astrology and tarot videos. So, okay, I'm gonna stop right now. Thank you for listening.